Going to the beach is supposed to be a fun and joyous place to be. I have fond memories of going to the beach for vacations when I was a kid, but after hearing these stories, I'll be a little more cautious when I go, and I'm sure you'll be too. Here are 3 true horror stories that happened at the beach. My family had a private beach we'd visit every summer, about an hour's drive down the main road to an unmarked dirt path. We found it while searching for a restroom, and with not so much as an outhouse in sight, my dad had driven our old station wagon off the nearest exit to let me pee in a bush. The entrance was full of rusted old signs, some barely legible from decades of weathering. Private property, keep out, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted, they'd shout, like crotchety old men waving their canes. Old men we ignored while we played in the sand, too sick of the road to search for parking at a crowded beach another 20 miles out. It was our own little playground where none would disturb us, a stretch of beach long forgotten by locals and tourists alike. Breaking the smoothness of the wave-worn shores with our footprints felt magical, like the first stroke of paint on a black canvas. My sister and I would search for treasures in colorful tidal pools, grubby fingers grasping in the crystal-clear water for shells long abandoned, driftwood and coins from distant lands. The sea's bounty was vast, and we were the ones to claim it. When the sun had set and our hands were white and wrinkled, we'd bundle up in towels and join our parents by the light of a crackling fire. Dad would recount stories about his surfer days, and we'd sit surrounded by warmth, love, and plenty of marshmallows. It was our secret haven, a pristine shore unspoiled by man. It was because of these memories that when it came my turn to plan the family reunion, I chose our beach as the resort. We packed coolers full of watermelon, a grill, wieners, beach balls, towels, and some plastic digging tools for a sandcastle contest. It had been over 15 years, but eventually we found the same old beach with the same old signs we ignored in the same old ways. Mom and Dad settled down in their lawn chairs in the shade while I herded my family towards the campsite to help with the tent. Around sunset, it was time for the bonfire, and John, my brother-in-law, was nowhere to be seen. I remember him taking the kids out to see the tidal pools and asked them if they knew where he was. Giggling, they replied that they buried him up to his neck in sand over by the big rocks. Squinting, we could just barely make out the spot where his head poked out, shielded by the sun by a goofy straw hat. With a sigh and an eye roll, my sister and I set out to dig up her husband. As we got closer, he shouted something, but we couldn't quite make out against the roar of the ocean waves. He kept shouting, tossing sand to his mouth and knocking off his hat. "Hang tight, we'll get you out," we called back, and quickened our pace to a jog. Out of the corner of her eye, I spied something moving in the craters of sand we kicked up. The shouting stopped by the time we reached him. John's head leaned back against the sand, eyes unfocused in a glazy stare. I slapped him. No response. We dug at him urgently, me with the pail and my sister with the shovel. She jumped back. Hundreds, if not thousands of squirming, worm-like creatures were eating John's body. They crawled in and out of the tunnels they bore through his flesh, wiggling as we brushed them off with the plastic tools and curling up on contact with the ground. Their pale, inch-long bodies pulsed darkly as they lapped up his blood. I whipped out my cell phone light to get a better look, but they made a strange buzzing sound and retreated, tunneling beneath his skin, jerking his ribcage this way and that. We left him half buried and ran back, shouting at everyone to get to the cars, where we called the police. When they got here, they took one look at John and made another call. A couple of guys in hazmat suits showed up and took him away. While we waited, I reread the signs by the entrance, finding a faded yellow notice we missed. Warning: this property is condemned by the authority of the state police department. There's a beach off the coast of South Carolina where swimming is prohibited. It exists between 2 small islands, and the force of the currents running between them can multiply at a moment's notice. Dozens have died there over the past decade, whether it was a result of a bet that went wrong, a show-off attempting to display his strength, or simply someone who missed reading the numerous warning signs on the way to the sand. But I haven't died yet. though I have only been twice. I was born and raised near the Pacific. By the time I'd started high school, I had been through 3 surfboards. But the waves of the Atlantic aren't nearly as big. Except for one, that is. One that puts even those in the Pacific to shame. And it only shows up at one particular beach. The no swimming beach. When the conditions are just right. When the tide is going out, the moon is full, and the temperature of the water is about to flip. Something magical happens between the 2 islands. Something about the unique geological formation that creates the perfect wave. I remember hearing the rumors and watching the weather for the conditions to line up. And I had waited overnight from my car parked in the sand 2 years ago, seeing the ocean recede and swell up into a glorious crescent, the moonlight illuminating the foam over the murky water, and I knew one day I would have to capture it. So the next year, I returned with my board and I wading out into the sea, the water seeping through my wet suit, the beach empty, the dark shape of seaweed waving below me. Besides the crashing water, it was dead quiet. No frogs croaked, no birds chirped. It was just me in the ocean. Then, I saw it forming in the distance as the water level sank like a draining bowl. My eyes widened as I kicked forward. It roared towards me and I prepared to ride it. But just that second, my foot caught on something, a tangle of undergrowth or a branch. I kicked, but the object held firm, something sharp biting into my ankles like briars. Above me, the wave grew taller and I kicked again, unsuccessfully, until the water crashed down upon me and I was ripped free. I tumbled into the darkness, slamming through the thick and slimy undergrowth until I was regurgitated on the beach, gasping for air, water trickling out of my nose and salt stinging my eyes, with blood oozing from my leg and several long scratches that scarred over months later after continual infections. I'd missed my chance. Until next year. That year, I kept my feet higher up, planning out as the wave surged forward, and I caught it just in time, watching as water pulled away from the beach to feed the wave, leaving just enough water to see the shadows of lay underneath, of what I once thought was seaweed. Hands. Thousands of hands extended upwards like plants from the sand, their fingers open and searching, only emerging from the elbow up, with nails that reflected the moonlight like scales. And as the water pulled away, they burrowed deeper into the sand, only to return back to full height under the water's murky protection. Some clutched entire fish, others held driftwood, and others held objects too difficult to discern, but not too difficult to infer. From my vantage point alone, I could see them, with the water at its lowest points and looking directly down. They reached upwards towards me as my surfboard wobbled and coasted forward until it grounded against the shore, the fins digging into the sand. Turning around, I could see they were what I once mistaken for the dark outline of seaweed, rising and falling with each crest. Waiting, grasping, and looking at my leg scars, 5 streaks of shining tissue, I realized it wasn't the currents that pulled swimmers under at the beach. Every summer it's the same thing. All my friends want to go to the beach, and I do whatever I can to get out of going. I make up some excuse or play it off with some joke and hope the topic doesn't get brought up again. I don't tell people the real reason I don't go to the beach, why I don't like spending too long in the shower, or being around water in general. I'm writing this because I hope getting it off my chest will help me get over this thing. It all started when I was 8. My family had taken a trip to the beach. I remember being so excited to go. I remember running to the water's edge as soon as we climbed over the small hill between the parking lot and the sand. I remember my dad yelling at me to stop as he came running over and grabbed me. I had to wait until we set up the cooler and chair and all the other stuff. Finally, after my mom had rubbed suntan lotion on me and my sister, I was finally allowed to go into the water. I ran as fast as my legs could. I remember how hot the day was, par for the course for a late July day. And I remember how nice the cold ocean water felt. I splashed around for about an hour or so, keeping close to shore like I was told. At least at first. But like most kids do, I slowly began to back out into deeper water, becoming confident in my ability to safely swim back to shore. I remember I got out to where I couldn't feel my feet on the sand anymore. Then I heard it. Someone was calling my name. I stopped and looked around, but no one seemed to be trying to get my attention, so I ignored it and went back to swimming. After a few moments, I heard the voice call out again, this time while I was underwater. I grabbed a fresh breath and quickly dove back down. I heard the voice again, calling out to me from the deeper water. I don't know why I did it, but I followed the voice. Suddenly, something grabbed my foot and pulled me down. I struggled as much as I could, but I could feel my legs begin to burn from the lack of air. Just as I was about to give up, whatever it was let go of my leg, and I rose to the surface. I quickly came up and took a deep breath. I began to swim back to shore, but then I stopped. I couldn't see the shore. I looked all around me, and I couldn't see anything but open water all around me. Not only that, but something else was wrong. I couldn't see the sun. It was a beautiful sunny day. Not a cloud in the sky, but now, only a light gray sky. I looked around and the water was perfectly black. I didn't move. I just kept looking around me, hoping that I would see sand, but none. Then, just as I was beginning to cry, I felt the hand grab my leg and pull me back down. Next thing I remember, a lifeguard was standing over me. Apparently I'd gone out too far and the undertow had taken me under. For the rest of the day, I didn't go anywhere near the water, and was glad when we finally left. I never told anyone what really happened to me. I didn't think anyone would believe me, an 8-year-old story, but I know it's true. I know it's true because every time I go swimming in a pool, sit in a hot tub, or stay in the shower too long, I hear it calling me back. Nathan, we're waiting. Come swim with us.